Catherine goes nuts after Camilla caught bullying her daughter. It happened in a heartbeat, but it changed everything. A quiet recital room at Windsor. Candlelight flickering. Fingers hovering over ivory keys. Princess Charlotte was ready to play. Then a sharp whisper. "Not now, dear." Queen Camilla's voice. Just loud enough for Charlotte to hear. Just cold enough to wound. Charlotte froze. Her hands trembled. Her eyes searched the room. And they landed on her mother. Catherine's stare cut through the silence. Not flinching. Not blinking. Just watching. Everyone in the room felt it. The tension. The temperature shift. As if the future queen had just declared war without saying a word. Because this wasn't about music. It wasn't about manners. It was about power. And Catherine had seen enough. The mask cracked in public just for a second. But behind the palace walls, that second turned into a storm. Cut to black. Here's how it all unraveled. It was supposed to be one of those polished, perfectly forgettable royal events. A spring luncheon at Windsor Castle, formal enough for protocol, relaxed enough to feel personal. The kind of gathering where centuries of history share space with fresh-cut daffodils and polite laughter. Where royal cousins compare boarding school stories over roast lamb. Where the king chuckles gently at a private joke. And the queen consort holds court, always with a flute of champagne in hand. Camilla was in her element. Charles, too, easing into his role as monarch with the practiced calm of a man who'd waited a lifetime. William and Catherine arrived together. Composed, elegant, exactly as the firm expects. And Charlotte walked in behind them, quiet, a little too quiet. At first, no one noticed. But Catherine did. The slight lag in her daughter's step. The uncharacteristic stillness. The way Charlotte folded her napkin over and over again, eyes downcast. It was subtle, but it was off. And for Catherine that was enough. She didn't ask questions. Not yet. But her body language shifted. She leaned in closer, held Charlotte's hand under the table longer than usual. That instinct, the one that transcends titles and tiaras, had kicked in. Not as the Princess of Wales, as a mother. Because, beneath all the glamour, the Windsor family still operates like any other powerful personalities. Hidden resentments, silent rivalries. Catherine and Camilla had always kept things cordial. But close? No. There was a generational divide, sure. A difference in taste, in tone, in public posture. Camilla had clawed her way into the monarchy. Catherine had been groomed for it. One had survived scandal. The other had survived scrutiny. But neither woman had forgotten the pecking order. And when it came to the children, Catherine's children, that's where the invisible lines turned into brick walls. Because Catherine wasn't just raising future royals. She was raising humans, with feelings, boundaries, voices. And on that spring afternoon, one of those voices had been quieted, not by chance, by choice. And suddenly, that luncheon didn't feel quite so forgettable anymore. Catherine and Camilla were never enemies, but they were never truly close. From the very beginning, theirs was a relationship built on formality, respectful smiles, careful compliments, an understanding of roles, not of hearts. Camilla, the queen consort, had fought battles Catherine never had to face. She knew what it meant to be hated by the public and protected by the palace. She had earned her place in the monarchy the hard way, and she never forgot it. Catherine, by contrast, was the golden girl, the poised commoner who never put a foot wrong. She didn't fight her way in. She blended her way in. Camilla respected that in her own way. But admiration is not the same as affection. Their differences became clearest around the children. Camilla held tightly to the old guard, the stiff upper-lip school of royal parenting. Discipline, politeness, boundaries. Children were to be seen, not heard, and certainly not encouraged to interrupt adult spaces with feelings or questions. Catherine was different. Her approach was gentle, hands-on, intuitive. She believed in listening, not lecturing, in giving her children the space to feel. Empathy mattered. So did emotional intelligence. It wasn't soft, it was strong. And Charlotte, of all three children, reflected that strength most clearly. She wasn't just smart, she sparkled. Sharp, funny, fearless. The kind of little girl who could charm a room and stand her ground. So when she turned quiet, Catherine noticed. Because Charlotte doesn't shrink. Not unless someone makes her. Over the years, there had been small things, micro moments, barely visible to the public eye. A side glance from Camilla when George laughed aloud at a garden party. A curt "that's enough, darling," when Louis wandered too close during a photo op. Little things that never made headlines but never sat quite right. Once, after a trooping the color rehearsal, Catherine overheard Camilla gently scolding Charlotte for fidgeting. "Ladies don't swing their feet," she said. Charlotte went silent for the rest of the day. Catherine didn't say anything. Because back then, it was easier not to. There's a hierarchy in the palace. Unspoken rules about who gets to speak up and who stays quiet. And Catherine had always chosen grace over confrontation. She knew the power of restraint. She knew that when you play the long game, sometimes you swallow the small things, for the sake of appearances, for the sake of peace. But this time was different. This wasn't a quiet scolding behind closed doors. This was public. This was intentional. A moment of silencing made visible. And it wasn't just about Charlotte. It was about control, territory, lines crossed. And Catherine, the watchful mother, the careful future queen, felt something shift. The moment Camilla shushed Charlotte at that piano bench, Catherine stopped playing along. It was midway through the luncheon when Charlotte returned from the corridor, pale, lips pressed tight, her usual spark dimmed. She walked straight to Catherine's side and didn't say a word. Catherine instinctively shifted in her seat. Something wasn't right. She could feel it in her chest before she heard a thing. She leaned down, brushing a hand along Charlotte's arm. "What is it, darling?" she whispered, eyes soft but searching. Charlotte hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a breath, Granny said, "I'm not to speak unless someone speaks to me first." The words hit Catherine like ice water. Not Granny. Not her mother. Camilla. Catherine swallowed hard. Her smile stayed frozen in place. Around her, the room kept humming, glasses clinking, conversation flowing. But inside, something shifted. That wasn't discipline. That wasn't royal etiquette. That was silencing. And Charlotte had believed it. Catherine took her daughter's hand, holding it in both of hers under the linen tablecloth. She didn't say a word. Not yet. But she didn't let go. Later that afternoon, at the refreshment table, Catherine stood just a few steps away as Charlotte reached politely, carefully for a second scone, and there it was again. "Perhaps one is enough, darling," Camilla said, voice light but pointed. It was that same tone, that same glint behind the smile, the kind of correction that didn't guide it shamed. Charlotte shrank back again, shoulders curled, face flushed, and Catherine watched it happen. Not once, not as a slip, but again. There was a pattern forming. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. The final moment came just before they were meant to leave. Guests were gathering in the music room, a casual tradition after Windsor lunches. Someone always played piano. It had become a sweet, almost silly custom. Charlotte, ever eager, walked toward the grand piano tucked beneath the stained glass windows. Her fingers hovered, and she turned to Camilla, eyes wide, full of hope. "May I play something, please?" Camilla didn't even turn her head. She took a sip of her drink and said, dry as dust, "Sit still like a proper young lady," just like that. Dismissed. Not unkind but not kind either, and Catherine saw it all. She was across the room, mid-conversation, but her eyes never left her daughter's face. The shift, the rejection, the confusion. Charlotte turned away, quietly, obediently. Again, that was the moment Catherine stopped pretending. She didn't cause a scene. She didn't raise her voice, but her stare lingered. A stare that said, "I saw that." A stare that said, "This is not how we treat her." A stare that said, "Not again." The room kept moving, but Catherine didn't. Inside, she was burning, not just with anger, with clarity. She had spent years mastering the palace game, the restraint, the diplomacy, the silent swallowing of small slights. She'd endured the stares, the whispers, the comparisons, but this wasn't about her. This was about Charlotte, and Catherine realized, in that instant, it was no longer just uncomfortable. It was unacceptable. Camilla may have been queen, but Catherine was a mother, and mothers remember everything. That night, after the castle lights had dimmed and the headlines returned to their usual rhythm, Catherine moved through the quiet halls toward Charlotte's room. She didn't knock, just slipped in gently, like she always did. Charlotte was curled up beneath her pink and cream duvet, hair tousled across the pillow, wide-eyed in the soft glow of her bedside lamp. Sleep hadn't come. Catherine sat down beside her, smoothing a strand of hair back. She didn't start with questions. She started with presence, warmth, stillness, love. "I saw how brave you were today," she whispered. Charlotte blinked, lips quivering just slightly. Then quietly, Granny Camilla doesn't like when I talk too much. Catherine felt the words settle into her chest like a stone. So simple, so sincere, no bitterness, just belief. She wrapped her arms around Charlotte, holding her close, one hand gently stroking her back. You are never too much, she said softly. You are exactly who you're meant to be, and anyone who makes you feel small doesn't get to decide your worth. Charlotte nodded, but her little fingers stayed tightly clutched around Catherine's sleeve. She wasn't ready to let go. Neither was Catherine, because this was the moment it all changed. This wasn't palace gossip. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was her daughter internalizing shame, and Catherine knew. That cannot stand. Later that night, once the children were asleep and the house had hushed into its usual rhythm, Catherine found William in the study. He looked up the moment she entered. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just told him everything, calmly, clearly, completely. William listened, every word. And when she finished, he let out a long breath. We handle it carefully, he said, not coldly, strategically, because he knew how delicate it was. Camilla wasn't just a relative. She was the queen, and in the royal world, conflict doesn't happen in public, it happens in gestures. So Catherine made one, quiet, controlled, unmistakable. Charlotte would not attend Camilla's charity event the following weekend. No piano performance, no photo op, no explanation, just absence. And in royal circles, absence is louder than scandal. Word traveled fast. Within a day, it reached Clarence's house and Camilla. She didn't confront anyone directly, but as she stepped into a garden appearance that week, a staffer overheard her mutter beneath her breath, probably too delicate for a little mud. It was meant to be a joke, dismissive, derisive, but it traveled too, and this time, it reached Catherine, not in rumor and certainty, because in the palace, nothing truly stays private. Not glances, not gestures, not muttered insults. And that was the final confirmation. This wasn't just about Charlotte. This was about a culture of control disguised as tradition, of snide remarks hidden behind royal smiles, of women being told to shrink, generation after generation. And Catherine? She'd had enough. This was no longer about preserving harmony. It was about protecting dignity. This isn't just about Charlotte anymore, she told William quietly that night. It's about the lines we draw and the ones we erase. Because the crown may belong to Charles, the throne may belong to Camilla, but the future? The future sits at the edge of a little girl's bed, whispering to her that her voice is worthy, and that future belongs to Catherine. The palace didn't shake. No walls crumbled. No dramatic showdowns, but something changed. It started with the invitations, where once Charlotte's name was penciled in for every formal outing, garden parties, meet and greets, staged appearances. Now, her schedule was curated, selective, intentional. Sometimes she came, sometimes she didn't. No explanation offered, just a shift, a signal. And for those who knew how to read the room, that signal was deafening. Inside Kensington Palace, aides began whispering a new phrase. Princess Catherine is watching everything more closely now. It wasn't a warning, it was a fact. She wasn't being dramatic, she wasn't demanding, but she was present, in every decision, in every detail. Nothing slipped past her anymore, not seating charts, not press access, not casual mentions of which royal granny the children were spending time with. Every move now ran through one unspoken question: is this what's best for them? William, for his part, kept things diplomatic. He always had, but behind closed doors, his stance was clear. He was backing Catherine, not just as a husband, as a father. And when staff quietly suggested ways to smooth things over to keep Camilla involved with the children for the sake of optics, William's response was measured. We won't force proximity just to preserve appearances. That was that. Meanwhile, Camilla adapted. Publicly, she remained all smiles and warmth, handshakes, photo ops, speeches peppered with good humor. But those closest to her noticed the shift. She was more cautious around Charlotte, more performative in her praise, less dismissive, less off the cuff, because now, she knew, someone was watching, and that someone wasn't the press. It was Catherine. Still, Camilla didn't apologize. She didn't reach out. She didn't need to. In her world, silence was strategy, but Catherine understood that game, and she played it better. There was no confrontation, No dramatic reckoning, just distance. A polite smile that didn't reach the eyes. A steady hand on Charlotte's back at public events. An empty seat where Camilla might have once been included in a child's milestone. And no words, just boundaries. Within the royal households, the whispers began to grow. Has a line been crossed? They didn't mean etiquette. They meant power, because for all her polish and poise, Catherine had made something crystal clear. Her children were not palace props. They were not lessons in decorum. They were not pawns in generational tug-of-war. They were hers. And no title, not queen, not consort, not even granny would change that. In a family ruled by hierarchy and silence, Catherine didn't need to raise her voice. Her restraint was her rebellion. Her quiet defiance was her power. And while the world kept spinning, while headlines moved on and the monarchy marched forward, the people inside the palace felt the shift. Because when Catherine drew that invisible line in the sand, she didn't do it for herself. She did it for her daughter. And for every girl who's ever been told to sit still, be quiet, and shrink. No press release, no public feud, just a message, louder than words. Her children come first. Always. In the monarchy, mothers wear two crowns. One is public, made of duty, tradition, centuries of expectation. The other is private, shaped by instinct, love, and the quiet ache of protection. For years, Catherine wore the first one flawlessly. She smiled when expected, stayed silent when it mattered. She learned the language of diplomacy, the art of restraint. She played the long game, but now, she's learning something else, that sometimes, the most royal thing a woman can do is draw a line. Catherine didn't erupt. She didn't retaliate. She simply shifted. Not for power, not for pride, for Charlotte. Because in that piano room, in that garden, in every little moment when her daughter's light was dim, Catherine saw the cost, and she chose to respond, not with spectacle, but with protection. Charlotte won't remember every word Camilla said. She won't recall the tone, the timing, the tension, but she will remember the feeling of her mother kneeling beside her bed, of arms that didn't let go, of eyes that didn't look away, of love that didn't stay silent. And maybe that's what matters most. Not royal protocols, not titles or tiaras, but the kind of legacy that lives inside a child's sense of worth. Because in a family built on whispers, Catherine may just be becoming the loudest voice of all, not by shouting but by standing, by saying nothing louder than others say everything, by refusing to shrink so her daughter never has to. In the final light of a quiet afternoon, Catherine watches Charlotte play in the garden, laughing, free, her laughter ringing out like bells across the palace grounds. She is safe, for now. And Catherine, the mother, the protector, the future queen, stands in the doorway, watching, guarding, ready. Because if this is how she protects Charlotte now, what kind of queen will she be tomorrow? What kind of world will she shape when the crown is finally hers to hold?